Well, maybe.
Should be okay. Don't play with it much.
Yeah.
I used the last week. I went to.
No, what is that?
Yeah.
It comes to the ego.
Yeah. Should have gotten them the last one.
Yeah.
But if you go in under the regular thing, Barbara can promote you.
So she has the power.
You can't deal with that.
I'll accept responsibility for that. Skipping it.
Good.
All right. Okay, welcome everyone to our part 2 of our town council meeting, November 22nd. Before we begin, just need to go to our emergency evacuation. In the event of an emergency, you have 2 doorways to your left, as well as one in the front here. We exit out of the building and across the street at the school administration building and wait for further instruction at that time. At this point, I'd like to stand for our pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Claire, if you do the roll, please.
Ms. Abbott? Here. Mr. Hamilton?
Here.
Mr. Capson?
Here.
Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Mr. Aguirre?
Here, motion passes 5-0.
No
President's-
No motion. Everyone.
Oh, jeez, sorry. I'm already off on the wrong foot. All right, prior to tonight, we did hold executive session under Rhode Island General Law 42, 46, 5B2 potential litigation. No votes were taken. I'd also like to address an item that's not on the agenda tonight, which is the solar ordinance moratorium that was discussed at our previous council meeting. I do apologize. I dropped the ball in getting that one put on this agenda. It will be on our next agenda, I assure you. Clerk calling me for that. So I do apologize for any inconvenience and inconvenience here tonight for the solar ordinance moratorium. We'll discuss it next time. And with that, we'll move on to our consent agenda. We've got bills and annual license renewals.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
And Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. No, the motion's passed. Next, we have tax voucher. Request approval for tax vouchers 2021 1122-41 to 2021 1122-04.
Move to approve.
All those in favor?
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson? Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. 5-0.
Mr. President, our council, ladies and gentlemen. Retired police chief Colonel Madison Bailey passed away last week. Chief Bailey was appointed to the police department in 1967. He was promoted to chief in 1981. He retired in 1994. We take the liberty to echo Chief Peter's comments and thank the members of the police fire department, the Portsmouth Fire Department, for their participation in the dignified send-off of Chief Bailey as the funeral motorcade passed by the police and fire departments on Friday morning. Their participation, in addition to the fire department's apparatus, was truly a special recognition for the chief. And we hope this recognition had a positive impact on Chief Bailey's family during this difficult time. Unfortunately, with regard to the chamber's audiovisual renovation, the parts are still stuck somewhere in the road, but they're not here. The project will be delayed and the contractor has rescheduled the renovation to start on January 26th and finish on February 2nd. I'd like to report that 3 members of the Portsmouth Police Department were recognized by Mothers Against Drunk Driving this past fall, or this fall, I'm sorry, for their efforts in enforcing drunk driving laws in Rhode Island. Those recognized were Officer James Tullier, Officer Austin Suspaniak, and Officer Ryan Chika. Each officer was the recipient of NAD's Law Enforcement Achievement Award. In addition, Officer Tullier received NAD's Emergency Services Award for his life-saving actions regarding an infant being transported in an overturned car seat in a vehicle operated by an intoxicated driver. So hats off to our officers who were recognized. With regard to civic support requests, the civic support request application form for fiscal year 2023 is published and is available on our website. Applications are due no later than December 3rd. And then lastly, with respect to the Portsmouth Comprehensive Community Plan, the final draft of the plan is now posted on our website. And right now, the public hearings are scheduled to begin January 31st. That concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Moving on to resignations and appointments. First, we have the resignation of Ann Fiore from the Economic Development Group.
Move to accept the resignation with regret. Thanks for the service.
Second. All those in favor?
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. And next we have the resignation for the Juvenile Hearing Board for Ms. Jennifer Viera.
Resignation be accepted with our regret and thanks for the service.
Second. All those in favor?
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. And next, it's the appointment to the Bristol Ferry Town Committee, reappointment for Ms. Ann Vickers. Vote to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0.
Mr. President, just, Madam Clerk, are you going to reapply, advertise for all these open positions you do on a regular basis? Especially the juvenile hearing board.
Yep.
Old business, it's an update from the community electricity aggregation plan update.
Richard Talipsky, 79 Carmel Drive, Director of Business Development. We've been working for over a year and a half on our community electricity plan. And since it's getting close to the time to implement the decision, I've brought Jamie Rhodes from Good Energy, our contractor, to give us an update.
Thank you, everybody. Once again, my name is Jamie Rhodes. I work for Good Energy, and as Richard just said, the goal here is just to give an update about where we're at in the process. I see some slides up there, so I can walk through this. I know you gave me 20 minutes on the agenda. I have no intention of taking that much time for an update. But I did just want to walk through a little bit. I know we had one of my colleagues, Daria, was here virtually a couple months back before we went from the Public Utilities Commission. And so since that the Public Utilities Commission, I thought it'd be great to come back and let you know where we're at in the bidding process and what the next steps for the program are going to be. We can go to the next slide. You guys have seen this before. I will not necessarily run down who we are, but we always put this at the top of our presentations. Two things I do want to note that since Portsmouth had its plan approved at the Public Utilities Commission, Newport received their draft plan, and we have scheduled on December 8th a public hearing in Newport. And Narragansett has signed on to develop its own aggregation plan. So there's been 2 new communities since we were last before you that decided to move forward with developing these plans. And we'll go into the impact of that as we get a little further down. Go to the next slide. I think we've had this, but just as a reminder of the purpose of the aggregation plan. Once again, this is not changing the utility. We still have National Grid providing transmission services for electricity. This is about determining a default electricity supplier for the town of Portsmouth in conjunction with the other communities that are moving forward with the aggregation program, along with optional products that include more renewable energy than state minimum standards for residents that are seeking to procure more renewable energy than the state minimums. So go on to the next slide there. So just we did a quick recap of how we got here. It was June 22nd of last year, where I was a voice in the ether as opposed to a person in front of you, describing the plan as you all decided to move forward with the resolution to draft the plan. We had a public hearing in August on that plan, following which the council approved the aggregation plan and submitted to the Public Utilities Commission. We delayed on actually bringing it to the PUC for approximately 8 to 9 months, give or take, to allow the first programs move through the PUC process. It took them 9 months to get approved, but after that happened, once Portsmouth submitted its plan, it took only 8 weeks for approval. So we definitely benefited from the work of the other communities that came before. In September of this year, so just a few months ago, the Public Utilities Commission approved Portsmouth's aggregation plan, and we're able to secure data from National Grid indicating how much electricity is being used in Portsmouth in order for us to develop a bid process. And so, as noted here at the bottom, there are 5 programs that are approved: Barrington, Providence, Central Falls, South Kingstown, and Portsmouth. And what we've been able to do is bundle together that electricity demand and to go out and take it out to bid at this point. At this moment, the bids are still outstanding. We are meeting with town staff next week to actually review responses. So at this point, I'm not able to talk about the bids while they are outstanding. I don't want to give, if any of the folks that bid on it, I don't want them tuning into the meeting and hearing information separately. So I'm going to avoid talking about the bid itself until we bring back the recommendation to the council. Right now, as you see here, we're gearing up towards the May launch for the program, assuming that bids come back acceptable to the council. And so that's kind of the target that we have out there, give or take a month, depending on the administrative details to get this up and running. So we'll go to the next slide here. Just to give a little sense of what we've been able to accomplish. I know we'll come in front of you about a 6 times, but in the meantime, we've actually been able to do a lot of background work to create an environment where aggregation will be successful. That includes the Public Utilities Commission process. At this point, thanks to the work of the communities here, Rhode Island has the fastest review and approval time for aggregation plans in the country, which pretty much says that they look at the plans that have been approved and they say that your plan is a lot like those, and we're going to accept that is okay because we've already done that. The utility, we developed a tariff with the utility, which sets out the rules and regulations for how the utility interacts with the aggregation program. So it includes data sharing, as well as enrolling customers into the program in the process by which that happens. There's another program called purchase of receivables. That's what we've been able to work on with the PUC, with the energy suppliers and National Grid. This is POR purchase receivables that led to lower pricing, competitive supply pricing in other states. It also is the tool by which we're able to preserve arrears management programs, arrears management plans for low-income customers, as well as to protect budget billing programs for any individual consumer that seeks to pay one amount every month rather than the ups and downs that you have based on usage. So all those programs are going to be maintained for the aggregation plan. We just had to go through the work with the PUC and National Grid to make sure that was the case. Two other exciting things, at least from electricity wonks such as myself, we've actually designed a new energy source disclosure label to support the aggregation plans, which will be posted to and delivered to everybody who participates in the program to describe to them where their electricity actually came from. Not sure if any of you have looked at the one that National Grid sends out. I would posit to say that it's generally incomprehensible. It doesn't provide that much actual useful information. So we work with the PUC to design a new one that will tell people over the course of the year what were the sources of their electricity, where did it come from, where were the renewable energy sources, to make sure that's published to everybody on a quarterly basis when they're released. And we've also worked with the PUC to have annual reporting requirements established for the program that allow us to report back on how much electricity was used by the program, how many residents participated in it, and other details that both the council might request and the PUC might request. And that those reporting requirements were just recently approved as well. One of the things that we're really excited about is all of these pieces coming into place in Rhode Island has really led us to what we believe has put us in a great position to have successful programs. And obviously, what that looks like when we discuss the bids in a couple of months, I think it'll pan out that way. If we go to the next slide here. So just to give you a sense of what happens from here until May, what the programs looks like is, so in November, we're reviewing the supplier proposals. We're putting together our report for the town administrative staff to review what we were seeing in the bid proposals. In December, we're going to, starting next week, we're meeting individually with each town, each city and town, as well as bringing together representatives from all 5 communities to hopefully reach consensus on which supplier and which proposal we think is the most beneficial to each community. The idea is to reach consensus so that all the communities going together represent even greater buying power than any individual community. So we want to bring everybody to consensus and work with the same supplier and provide it to all 5 communities who believe will get even greater beneficial pricing. And then through December, as we present recommendations back to the council, we put this as December, that it's potential to come back in December with it. If it takes longer for us to vet the bids, and we might push this off until 2022. All that's going to be worked out with staff next week, so we'll have a better sense of that timeline. But in the meantime, we'll be working on finalizing what the actual contract with the suppliers will look like, the electricity services agreement. So we're already working on workshopping that with the legal staff in each community, so that when we do the awards, you know exactly what the agreement looks like with them. January through March is the deadline for a number of the things that National Grid is required to do in the implementation of these programs. That includes purchase of receivables being finished, their bill, and then National Grid requested time to do a billing system upgrade prior to us enrolling new customers into it. And we're also waiting until it's either the end of January or beginning of February that we'll see the last resort service rates, the basic service that we all have from National Grid. Before we are finalizing an agreement with the supplier, we want to know what the rate that we're going to be compared to is going to be. So right now, while we have proposals about the approach of each supplier in procuring electricity, before we launch, we actually need to know the rate against which it's going to be compared so that we can determine whether it's going to be a successful program bringing a rate lower than service. Assuming the council approves the recommendation and awards the contract to the supplier to provide electricity to the program, March through May is when we'll be doing the education and outreach portion. At the end of the presentation, there's some examples of education outreach materials we've developed for other programs for you to review and look through. We do have a detailed education and outreach plan in the aggregation plan itself, which we always think of as our bare minimum. We're going to do the minimum is what we put in the plan. So as we engage in the education and outreach work, the expectation is that new ideas, new avenues, new groups to meet with and talk to, we'll take advantage of every one of those opportunities with the intent of informing as much of the community as possible what the aggregation program is coming up and what that firm date is going to be. That's going to include multiple direct mailings to each customer. First, a postcard saying this is coming, there's important mail coming, you should check for it. The next one is actually the consumer notification letter, which gives explicitly what the individual rates are, what the opt-out process is for anybody that's seeking to opt out of the program, as well as information about National Grid and where last resort service is available, and to indicate to everybody it is available at no cost to switch or to opt out of the program. And assuming we're able to launch in May, that the customer notification or the opt-out period prior to launch will be about 33 days. It's 30 days minimum, plus we add on time for mail delivery on each side of that. And through that, that'll be the period where every customer, every individual who wants to opt out of the program prior to launch can do so. That wraps up a couple of weeks before program launch so that we can begin enrolling customers with National Grid so that the next meter read, the actual electricity supply will change for them on their bill. So that's a little bit between now and May, what the work that's going to occur to that point. So we'll go to the next slide here. And as I mentioned, what changes for the program participation is that every electricity customer in Portsmouth can participate. It's available to anybody. Anybody that's currently using National Grid as their supplier, where you see that big red arrow that says National Grid, that's what their electricity bill looks like. They're eligible for automatic enrollment. Once again, the enrollment is automatic for anyone on last resort service to the town's aggregation plan. The participation is voluntary. People can opt out at any time at no cost, no fee. And then anybody who's already chosen a supplier, they've gone out to the market, they've chosen their own electricity supply rather than taking last resort service from National Grid. All those contracts are honored. Nobody's changed. They've gone out and made a firm choice of it. When they can choose to opt into the program, either at the termination of their agreement, they can leave that agreement with the other supplier. It's up to them, but the program will be available to them up to the point that they want to take advantage of it. So go to the next slide here. So I briefly touched on this, a number of the outreach efforts that are going to go. So there's just some high level points to it. So once again, the introductory postcard that we mailed to all of the customers, the notification letter that starts the opt-out period, indicating how to do so, as well as providing price comparison of all of the options that are available, so someone can make an informed decision. We'll be working with the town on doing press releases as well as media articles so that we're letting as many people know through those traditional media outlets as possible. Flyers, other printed materials at public meeting places, assuming that we are still meeting in public, which I hope does not end. So that's the library, senior centers, the town hall, everywhere that we can put something that would indicate that this is coming. Engaging on social media through the avenues that are available to us, through the town, through allied organizations. Doing presentations. We're going to be doing a roadshow through this to every community that's starting. Any community organization, the community action programs, anywhere where we can meet people to talk about their electricity supply in this program, we're going to be there. As well as we've already launched a new website for the town that includes the information of how we got here, these presentations and information, and we'll continue to put information up on the town website, the program website that's linked to the town's website. One more slide, I believe here. Oh, thank you, of course. And then the rest of the slides, I won't go through them, but they're available to both publicly as well as in the agenda package you received. Just examples of some of the media work that we've done with communities that we recreated for Portsmouth as well. And so, as I mentioned, just to kind of bring this back full circle, we're preparing our reports on the bid results so far. We'll be meeting with town staff. We've got 2 meetings scheduled next week to review this, both one-on-one as well as with the entire buying group, where we'll be determining how we bring the recommendation back to the council, when we bring the recommendation back to the council, as well as what the recommendation itself is, so that you all can make the final decision about what. And I'm available for any questions. The intent here was to give everybody an update so that when we bring that recommendation back, it's not out of the blue or left field. But I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for that update.
Sure.
Any questions? You see that you've got the opportunities coming up for the bids. They're due. You said they're due.
The technical proposals came in about a week ago. We've done one-on-one interviews with them, and so now we're preparing our recommendation for the town staff to review next week.
All right, so early next month.
That's right.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, under old business is our monthly finance report. Ms. Lasky.
What we also attached is the budget update for the month ending September 2021. As of the end of September, we're fully through the fiscal year 2022. The year-to-date general revenues are slightly ahead at 31% budget revenues. As we noted last month, real estate transfer fees are trending higher. We do have a projected slight offset in the projection for the fire department ambulance revenues, which seems to be stabilizing at this point. So that's going to trend more towards where it was originally budgeted. Year-to-date general fund expenditures are 25% of budget and are on track with budget. At this time, we expect to meet overall budget target and end the year with a nominal surplus.
Motion to receive and place on file.
Second. All those in favor?
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Okay, moving on to new business. First item is an update from the Butts Hill Fort Restoration Committee. They had a cleanup on November 6th. We have some information in our backup here. Is there any here?
Good evening, Craig Clark, 701 Park Ave, Portsmouth. I'm the co-chair of the Butts Hill Fort Restoration Committee and also vice president of Portsmouth Historical Society. When the Historical Society took on the initiative to start the restoration process in 2020, the intention was to form a temporary committee, until which time that committee was established enough to venture out on its own. And the Butts Hill Fort Committee has taken on a life of its own and was sort of dominating a lot of the discussion within the society. So we decided in October to start another group called the Battle of Rhode Island Association. And the main impetus for that decision was considering Butts Hill Fort and where it stands and why hasn't it gotten the respect it deserves and the continued restoration. It was saved from residential development in 1923 and it's gone into disrepair over the years. And one thought is that, you know, the education on the Battle of Rhode Island itself, the siege of Newport, the overall impact on Rhode Island is just underutilized. It's very, very little information. So the Battle of Rhode Island Association was created with the intention of fostering more relations with other entities, considering Fort Barton across the river, the First Rhode Island Regiment, Barn Army in Greenwich, all of these, you know, the thing, the greenhouse or home. So that was really the intention, is to create a larger organization at statewide level, which would then in turn ideally bring in more funding and more recognition to the fort. So that's the intention of the new organization. And I have some more slides talking about the progress we made today, but I'm not sure if this is the right meeting to do that or not, if we should do it at another time. And I'm happy to answer any questions according to, you know, regarding my letter on the 20th.
Thank you, Mr. Clark, for that update. And we are aware that, you know, there has been activity up there. You've been able to try to get some of the restoration work done. And I think that's kind of what brought us here tonight is, I guess there's maybe some, I guess, grounds for the overall level of effort up there, clearing and making sure things are being done in accordance with what the town understands to be, how our DPW is able to maintain it and whatnot, as well as if we need to comply with anything potentially from the historical, you know, Rhode Island historical preservation. I'm not aware of their requirements, but we just want to make sure that anything that's done up there is done, you know, in accordance with whichever governing body may be overseeing the project.
We have direct contact with Charlotte Taylor, who is with the Brown State Historic Preservation Commission. We met with her last spring, and we went over our overall plans for the fort. And again, we're planning on trying to raise funds this year for a master plan for this, to overcome some of this communication that we do. But I can assure you, anything's done today. I mean, Charlotte came back twice now since our two clearings, and she's very, very happy with what we've accomplished. You know, I asked her point and say, you know, Charlotte, if we go to this effort and we try to do all of this work and we say, we can't make, what's the worst case if that's happened so far? It will go back to where it is. And that's where we are. So we're giving a concerted effort to change the impact in Portsmouth here as well. Meaning that we look at Butts Hill Fort as the destination point for tourists. So we can add Butts Hill Fort to our main sign coming into the street to attract revolutionary buffs and the history. You know, anyone that wants to do that. To which then venture off to different areas within Portsmouth. So that's really our long-term intention. And, you know, we've done more in the past 6 months in the town than in the past 50 years, honestly. And I understand the concern about maintaining, but I didn't waste two. I spent a lot of time over the past, 8 months. My last intention is to watch anything come back on that hill, all those mines. But we have to expose it. We have to bring more awareness to what's going on up there. The vandalism, people doing donuts in the middle of the road, of the parade ground. So I respect what the town is looking for, and I get that. But there is a long-term solution, and with the right funding, we'll make sure it's going to be there forever. I would like to maybe have a schedule, something with the town administrator and others about other funding opportunities, how the town can help us with the master plan. We have quite a few, just got another $5,000 grant today for educational purposes. So I look forward to working with the town and turn that into the show.
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
Council President, members of the council, we did meet with Mr. Clark. I think the biggest concerns that DPW has, the tree commission and our tree warden has, is we're investing in a plan, and I think Mr. Clark will work on a plan, present to the council and to us, so we know what the next steps are. They're very enthusiastic, they really want to get going on this, but there needs to be a plan set in place before we allow any more funding. So that's our biggest concern.
So, Mr. Clark, if I could just ask you, sorry, it's gonna be a little bit of back and forth. So I mean, so you're working on the plan, and obviously, you're doing great things up there, and we don't want to discourage that. So I think what we're looking for is just to work together, come up with this plan so that everybody's in agreement about the extent of the clearing and the things are just done, in accordance with what historic preservation folks are looking for as well.
We want the same thing. And we don't plan on doing it. We're not actively cutting or doing anything and don't want to for that. Again, everything takes time. It's we have the 2026 anniversary coming up and the 2028 anniversary. I want to designate, we call it the Battle of Rhode Island Vista, which overlooks the high school. I want nothing more than to next year just identify 200 linear feet and attack that area. And we'll work on a simple plan until we get the funding for the overall master plan. Because it's really a shame that our high school kids don't understand what they have there. And I want nothing more than to fire for Cannon next October at homecoming off of that vista. Because I think by doing that, and people watching and seeing what's there, as high school grads, and I know a lot of you are, we didn't know what was there really. We didn't understand. I didn't understand for 2 years ago how significant that property is and the gem that we have. So we don't plan on doing anything else. Anything else we do, between now and having a master plan, we will just get it better squared away. So there's no more miscommunication. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Clark, one quick question. This actually go for both of you. You mentioned donuts and people driving up there is a way we can lock off vehicle access so that only DPW has access to it.
We have installed a couple of poles and we just bought the chain last week and we're planning on getting it up. We've talked with the chief and Scott about that.
And my extent, most of my extent, it's been through this meetings and, well, it used to be parking lot of high school.
Right. Exactly.
Back in the old day.
So we are working on that. We should have that resolved pretty quickly.
I should. I just lack of information on the background of this. when you talk about what we've done, who's the lead, under what authority, who, the town owns the property, how have the people been allowed to go up and do whatever they're doing? And I understand this new Battle Around Association entity was just recently formed. What do you envision that, that I assume nonprofit,
Yes.
what its role would be, and what type of authority you'd be looking to the town?
Well, we would like, and that's what we have to determine, figure out a little bit further, is, this year we raised $11,000. We've, we've done some nice clearing up there. We have a brochure, we have 11 community members. Our long-term intentions this year coming up to raise another $50,000. We've already procured funding for a website, a Battle Rhode Island website, which we can start linking to different sites. Long-term, we want to be a steward of the property and more educational. I think the high school has to have a nice big mural talking about the Battle of Rhode Island. Every student in our town knows why we're called the Patriots, not just a pretty name, fun name. But again, I don't think that the town does not understand the value of what we have. People from, there was a the Huntington militia in Long Island 2 years ago reached out to the Historical Society, wanting to come up and clear our fort. And that really rubbed me the wrong way. It's like, why is someone from from Long Island think more about our historic artifact than our own town? So I think that's what we're going to do. And when we get to that level, it's going to be a source of pride and a revenue generator as well. I'm not sure if I answered your question or not. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Barry.
Next item is our American Rescue Plan Act funds. Mr. Raymond.
So the community survey, so we're all fairly familiar with the American Rescue Plan by now. This was an act that was passed by Congress that created funds for communities throughout the country to invest for the purpose of overcoming the effects of the pandemic on their resources, their businesses, and their capital. So we conducted, in accordance with the tenets of the Act, a community survey was conducted to solicit citizen inputs into potential investments of the funds for ARPA, the American Recovery Plan Act. So if you go to the next page, please. We conducted this survey using SurveyMonkey during a period of 5 to 31 October. In addition to the online option, we had hard copy surveys available in Town Hall, Portsmouth Library, and Cruise Island Fire Station. We received overall 186 responses. If you go to the next, that's not. No. We received 186 responses that represented 13% of the registered voter population of Portsmouth. The statistical confidence level of this survey is 95% with a 7% confidence interval. Over 90% of the respondents were Portsmouth residents. Of those, 21 were owners or employees of businesses, 4 were town employees, and 22 were members of community organizations. Go to the next slide, please. This kind of tells you, the overall. It's just a graphic that shows you the overwhelming number of respondents who were residents identify themselves as residents. Go to the next slide, please. This one's a bit of an eye chart, but what it really does tell you is that in that question number 2, respondents were asked to rate the importance of broad areas of potential ARPA investments, and overwhelmingly 89% said that may be necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband structure was either important or very important. That was followed by 69% saying that performing, helping those workers who responded to the COVID pandemic was second, and then third, addressing the negative economic impacts caused by COVID-19. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, question 3. That was based on the responses to question 2, and we were asked respondents to make specific investment text comments. Again, this is an eye chart, but in summary, and you have the complete text responses in your package. But the number one response with regard to their text responses related to water, specifically Prudence Island water issues. So overwhelmingly, people want us to address stormwater issues and specifically drinking water issues on Prudence. Behind that were issues regarding comments on broadband. People do feel that there is a need for faster internet, faster broadband access on Quebec Island. And then there's a various number of responses that ranged from putting money in schools. They have their own funds available, so that's really be appropriate for the community. ARPA, recreation, senior center, which we addressed via different forum, and resiliency, and so on and so forth. So if you go to the next slide. So respondents were asked, I'm sorry, go back. Yeah. So respondents were asked to select their top 3 based on all the data they supplied so far. What were their top 3 areas of investments? The top 3 were water infrastructure, i.e. improve the access to clean drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure systems. Next, broadband infrastructure and internet access. And third, town infrastructure to the extent of reductions in revenue due to COVID-19. They want us to improve needed capital, make improvements to our capital investments, everything from roads to equipment. And those were the top 3. So now, that is the survey in a nutshell. If we go to this next slide, and again, it's an eye chart, I don't know if you can make that bigger, but I presented this back in April. And while then we didn't have the specific numbers, we do now know exactly what we're going to receive. And we'll receive it in 2 tranches. So we divided between support given directly to the community, municipality, i.e. Portsmouth, and then our portion of what is allocated to Newport County. And both of those tranches will receive, because you'll get your county money and municipal money in FY21, and then we'll receive the second tranche of both of those in FY22. That total will be a little over $5 million. There is a ton of guidance from the Treasury regarding what we could use ARPA for, but it really does come down to essentially 4 allowable uses: to respond to the pandemic or its negative economic impacts, premium paid to eligible workers performing essential work, for the provision of government services to the extent of reduction in revenue, i.e. if you lost revenue, you can backfill the revenue in the general fund, and the big one, to make necessary improvements in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. So we took a look at, we've been working on this for really since April. Lots of calls with my fellow town administrators, mayors, and managers throughout Rhode Island, and looking at the survey and our own capital needs, we came up with this list. You go to the next slide. So you have your total amounts that we expect, $5.1 million. In the budget hearings, you've already approved just a little under $800,000 in investments and improvements. So the Town Hall Council Chambers AV upgrade the support business, Portsmouth business campaign. And I do have to apologize. Some people may have received back that left that out. You did vote on that. That was approved on April 26th. So $50,000 for a support business campaign. Desktop, and then a lot of stuff for public safety. So desktop replacement for police, fire, and DPW, fire records and dispatching software and equipment, a lifeline ambulance, fiber optic line from DPW to the fire building, some upgrades to the emergency management director, and a dispatch council. So that came out to
Darling,
$4,000.
how many pickleball courts are there here on Aquidneck Island?
Not very many. There's none in Middletown. And there's a couple in Newport, I believe.
So could I say that, but creating 4 new pickleball?
There you go. Thank you. So that left, now we know exactly what we're getting. That leaves $1.3 million that needs to be obligated by the end of 2024 and spent by 2026. And as we talked about back in April, it's very important that whatever we use this money to invest in, that we're not creating structural deficit. And there will be many communities throughout the country that will fall in this trap. You cannot use it to pay down pensions. You should be using it to give unsustainable raises. You should be using it to create a program that cannot be sustained when these funds dry up. So taking the survey, our capital improvement plans, things that we know need to be done in town, we came up with this list. And this list really, in that second part, it centers on really 4 main areas. Town infrastructure to include capital improvements, water and wastewater investments, assistance to households, and provision of government services. If we break this down, at the top of the list, we have an emergency apparatus CIP capital improvement program, or probably a better nomenclature for that would be public safety investments. We're going to discuss that in the next agenda item. We've got a placeholder there of $1.5 million, which we'll explain in the next agenda item. The next big thing is the prudent silent water system. Prudent silent water has been under boil water advisory now for 3 years. There are substantial improvements that need to be made to that prudent silent water system that really are beyond the financial capability of the residents that are on that system. There just aren't enough residents. Their rates will become astronomical. Now, we could, as a community, sit there and say they're an independent agency, it's up to them. I don't think that's the right thing to do. And as a staff, we decided that we need to put some money towards this. Now, it's not just going to fall on Portsmouth. We worked very hard over the summer with Senator Reid and Senator Whitehouse's staff, and there is an earmark in the federal budget with about $1.3 million for prudent silent water. To get them past the finish line, we would need about another $300,000 in investment. And this will take care of the water treatment that is going to be required and the replacement and renovation of the piping system, the water distribution system. Next on the list, they're both related, the Island Park stormwater drain repair and the Portsmouth Park storm drain and catch basin replacement program. These 2 items here alone are probably more responsible for the reason why we have the on-site wastewater treatment system ordinance than anything else. Because these systems have degraded, they're old clay pipe, and contaminant from either malfunctioning septic systems or cesspools are leaching into these stormwater drain systems, which are leaching out into the bay. They need to be renovated. Some of these pipelines are well over 100 years old. And we think that we should be addressing that. We put in a placeholder here for a resilience program. We'll be getting a report in the next 2 months. We've been working for the last 18 months with SNAP. You've heard me give that report a few times. There will be a resiliency-related capital improvement program that will be presented to you. I anticipate that there are going to be things in there we can probably address with the ARPA funds. Under the guise of providing assistance to households, we have between unpermitted septic systems and cesspools, they're on the order of about 500 of these systems that still have to be addressed in Portsmouth. Of that, now you can divide people that have to take care of these into really kind of three pools. There are the people that can afford to replace these systems on their own. There are people that can afford to do it, but they need to take advantage of the low-cost system program, which the grant or the loan program. And then there are people who, through whatever circumstance that they find themselves in, even the payment on the CISLIC loan program is still beyond their ability to pay. So we have had reports of people who may be in a position where they need to sell their house because they can't afford to replace the system, the cesspool, or renovate the septic system that they have. So we're proposing, we figured that maybe between 7 and 10%, I don't have a crystal ball, may fall into that category. So we would propose that we set up a program, a grant program, where we could use some of the ARPA money to replace these systems without cost to these people that literally just cannot afford it, and we'd be able to keep them in their homes. There is a water main extension system that is required at DPW. And under the guise of, again, stormwater, wastewater treatment and care, we're proposing a new street sweeper. We're proposing a jet trailer. This is the system that jets out the catch basins and the associated piping. A new clamshell bucket, so that we only have one that's available. I don't remember, Brian can tell me how many, but we have hundreds and hundreds of catch basins. They literally finish them right in time for us to start salting and sanding the roads again. So this would at least hopefully cut that time in half. We have embarked on a program both in fire and police to replace their antiquated radio systems with the 800 megahertz radio systems. We still have DPW left to do. So we propose that we use some of the money for that. And then funding the police taser program out for the next 4 years. I left blank broadband. I believe the PEDC will at some point come to you with their recommendation. They have been working on the broadband issue on Aquidneck Island. I left it blank for a reason. We have been approached 3 times during my tenure as town administrator by companies that want to bring high-speed fiber optic internet to the island. We all know that the backbone exists on the island, but the companies that own this are not going to pay to get this into your home state. They've all made the determination that at least in their minds, the business model is not sustainable. It's going to cost too much. We made a determination to leave this line blank. I have not seen the PEDC report, but we don't feel that the amount of money that we're getting from APRO would make a dent into bringing broadband to Aquidneck Island. While to mere mortals, $5 million is a heck of a lot of money, and relative to the size of our budget or to the size of the investment that will be needed to bring fiber optic to every home in Rhode Island or Aquidneck Island, it won't even scratch the surface. So we're looking to how can we help the most people and provide the biggest bang to the buck for our needed improvements in town. We just left this one off the list for now. Not because we're malevolent, we do believe that there is growing support at the legislative level to put money into broadband infrastructure. And while it's a bet, It did almost clear the Senate. They passed it in the House. The Senate tabled it, but I suspect that it will be brought forward again now that the 1.3, I forget how many trillions, it's insane, but the over $1 trillion infrastructure bill that was just passed by Congress, I know that they're going to begin discussing this. As a matter of fact, they're discussing it now at the Senate in Providence on how they will invest that money into Rhode Island. So I suspect that this will be taken care of. We've made the determination at the state and federal level. And again, we were looking for the biggest bang for the buck. So here you have our priorities. So what we're asking for tonight is for us to approve these priorities. We're not asking to spend this money. We're asking that now if we get the approval, if you approve these priorities, then we can put the resources behind studying exactly what these would cost, give you greater backup, and then before any of these dollars get spent, we would come to you on a case-by-case basis for each one of these listed items for a specific approval. So that's what we're asking for tonight. And then if we get, well, depending on how you go tonight, we would also, in the next item, we want to brief to you a plan to make our public safety apparatus budget self-sustained.
Could I ask, sure. Since you are asking us to approve a set, an ordered list of priorities, largest item being the capital approval plan, emergency apparatus, can we discuss that before we vote on this so I can know fully what's the way these proposals?
Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely. If you can bring up the next group.
Sure, and we do have a hand raise
Sure.
from an attending that has called in.
Okay.
Well, not sure.
Well, why don't we,
Do you want to
well, yeah, because their question might be relevant.
put something else? I'm not sure. I just have BR. Could you please unmute? BR? Oh, okay, okay. Gone.
Okay.
No?
All right, well then let's move on to the next item. For background. Public safety.
So she's bringing that up. A few years ago, when Chief Ford, Fire Chief Ford, came on board, we worked on a plan to make the specifically the fire department capital improvement program not only more sustainable, but a little more solid. What tends to happen, they are if we discount for the roads, I mean, obviously the road, when you add in the roads, DPW CIP budget is by far the biggest in town. But if we take the roads out, you have funded that every year. The next biggest capital program we have is fire. Their equipment just costs so much. And the problem that we've run into over the years is that when we have the ability to take advantage of a low-cost piece of apparatus that's already been built, sometimes these opportunities come built. We can't take advantage of it if we don't have money. So we end up paying more. And the other thing is we have to get a commitment for a lot of this equipment 1.5 to 2 years out, because you have to sign a contract. And then they start building these trucks, and it takes them up to 2 years to build a truck. And the temptation becomes too great when you're trying to balance the budget. We'll put it off another year, and that forces them to constantly make this this choice between do I keep sinking money into an asset that's 30 years old, or do I take the gamble that we'll finally get it approved and I won't put the money in April? No, I'm hoping that I'll get a new asset approved in June. And we've created throughout all of the CIP, in which we've been whittling away for a number of years, but we still have quite a bow wave that we have built up in the CIP. So 2 years ago, we came up with a plan, we briefed the president. We were ready to brief the entire council, but the key was we needed to get some seed money to get the program started, to make it self-sufficient, to knock off a few of the things that were in the first 1 to 3 years of the CIP. We just couldn't find money. This ARP Act, this creates a once in a lifetime opportunity to wean ourselves off of leasing equipment, bonding for the equipment, and in any other way, shape, or form, borrowing to buy these assets. We have an opportunity and a plan, which the chief will walk you through, and our finance director, where we can at least create that segment of our CIP self-sustained. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Porter.
Council President, members of council, good evening. Barbara, did they get those copies?
They not.
And it's in-
No,
What is being passed around? We had a PowerPoint presentation to go through this. However, the new system isn't in place yet, and what we have right now can't do it. So you're getting printed copies. But just to give you a little background and where we're going with this plan, where we'd like to go. Up till now, the typical way apparatus are purchased is through a lease program. So rather than saving ahead of time, called funding the depreciation of the vehicle, and then having the money at the end when it's ready to be replaced, we lease it, and then when they're gone, we end up with this cycle of leasing. The chief can plan for this type of thing, but what happens typically, I'll note things in our capital plan that we need for next year, the year after. I have a 20-year plan. We bring those to the attention of the town administrator every year when we have our CIP meetings. We go through different hearings. Then it comes before you, and hopefully, now I have to hope that there's enough money available and that you forgive me some of that money to buy this apparatus. And then, as the town administrator mentioned earlier, our lead time for ambulances and fire apparatus is severe. If we go through this process and you don't have the money that year for me, now that's another whole year plus another over year bill. So the other thing is there's no room in this for the unexpected. We don't have a budget for if we blow an engine or transmission or the piece just really fails too early. So in the plan that we've put together here, some of the things that would change. We'd like to begin with $1.5 million of that seed money that was mentioned. That alone, if we didn't do anything else, that alone, through fiscal 24, we'll purchase a new engine, which is replacing the 2011. It would allow us to rehab one of our 2011 engines. So that would continue to be a frontline apparatus in good shape. To either rehab or replace our current ladder truck. Now that wouldn't be new. We're not looking for new. They're over $1 million now. We don't really feel that that's necessary at this point in time. We'd like to replace it with what we call a straight stick and something newer. And I'll get into that a little bit more further on. New chief's vehicle. Mine is a 2016 new assistant chief's vehicle, which is an 18, and a new medical rescue, which is an 18. Now, this is all at a minimum with that seed funding, but we want to continue. We're going to, with augmenting that with a fixed percentage, and I'll let Lisa go over that with you, the numbers. She's the numbers person. With the fixed percentage of the EMS revenue, we can continue this funding of apparatus, the next engine, the next car, the next brush truck, and so forth. Going out and just going right along for years to come. All the anticipated vehicle expenses will be covered in the plan. And our annual maintenance that the town already budgets for in fiscal 23, it's over 85,000. You wouldn't budget for that. The fuel, annual fuel, which for next year will be over 43,000, the town wouldn't budget for that. So this plan, we would be able to purchase our capital vehicle needs and pay for our fuel and pay for our maintenance. Some of the advantages, the town will be better prepared for these large capital purchases. You won't be hit with it. I know when I first came here, when I was just getting here that night, being appointed, you got hit with a new ambulance purchase that you weren't planning on, and this was just a few months into the fiscal year. Well, that won't happen with this plan. The town will also be able to reduce the work and costs. Leasing has costs with it, but it's also the workload. And by that, what I mean is when we lease, I found this very unusual, but we just bought a new vehicle. Well, we didn't buy that vehicle from a vendor. We bought the vehicle from a vendor. We bought we didn't buy the complete vehicle from one vendor. We bought the vehicle, and then another vendor got us radios, another vendor did the emergency lighting, another vendor did the lettering, another vendor put the cap on it, another vendor I bought flashlights for. Every one of those invoices I had to bring to finance, who had to get them to the bank, who then had to pay them, and things were running behind, and I had vendors calling me back saying, why haven't you paid your bill yet? And I called finance, and they said they paid the bill. All of that would be eliminated because the bill would come in and I would pay that bill through finance immediately. Most importantly, improve safety of the firefighters and residents of the town, having more safer, more reliable apparatus. So every typically 5, sometimes less years, NFPA comes out with new vehicle standards, new safety features are added, whether it's warning lights, different striping, seatbelt notification, rollover protection, anti-lock brakes, all the different technology that comes along. When your apparatus are older, they haven't had those different features that have come since their last build or the last specs for building apparatus. We would also have a warranty as we have newer vehicles, we have warranties with them. But one of the most important things is our apparatus right now are getting to the point where we have issues. Recently, our tower, just in the guys trained with it, bring it out in the ramp, they had it up in the air. It blew all hydraulics. It was out over it for the whole day, stuck up in the air. Not being able to be utilized to protect the residents of Portsmouth. One of our engines, our frontline engine, since before my time, it just shuts down. It will shut down, blow a fuse. When I first got here, we have to get the mechanics up from DePaul Diesel, come up with a particular fuse, unless we had some extras, a big cartridge fuse, but it was stuck. It could be going on an emergency call and it was dead. We've since jury-rigged it, couldn't find the problem, they couldn't find it. We've jury-rigged it in a fashion that we can at least get it back to the station if it happens out on the scene. These are problems that we shouldn't have and we should be able to deal with. Some more advantages, so the chief could better plan for his expenses. With the knowledge of what is available, having that in my back pocket, I can make better decisions. Do we really want to replace the transmission on that engine for $30,000 when we're going to get a new one next year? Can we do a Band-Aid approach? Or the opposite, look, we're not planning on a new one for 2 years out. So let's take the 30, let's take the 30,000 and maybe make it last an additional year. So we get that benefit of being able to move expenses from year to year. As I say next, the ability to adjust purchases between fiscal years for unplanned expenses, and the possibility of having funds available when opportunity presents itself. If you look at the next page, I listed a couple. The first one, just as an example for you, And I found this in 5 minutes on a nationwide, well-known site that deals with apparatus. This is the type of apparatus of ladder truck we would like to get. This is a 2007, we have a 2003. Now, I'm not saying I would try to get newer than that. I'm just using this as a quick example I found. This truck has 18,000 miles on it, our truck's 37. This is a straight stick, which we prefer. We have a tower. It's 107 feet versus 100. The asking price on this is $350,000. That seems like a pretty good deal, but you have to have that funding available. I can't now go to the town administrator, say, we'd like to get this money, go through the whole budget process, get it next July. This will be gone. There's a couple other examples. Oh, another example, we were notified recently of a brand new ladder truck that the style like this that we would like. It was caught up in a legal, somebody ordered it, then they didn't want it. It was legal, it was 5 years old, brand new. I was told we get it for $500,000 off. Again, you have to be ready to take advantage of those deals. And just as another point, the Rev Group, which owns several of the manufacturers, they just made a determination to raise prices 10%. Now, we actually dealt with them, and if we get the approval to purchase a new engine, we're going to be able to get in under that. But this happens, not only this, but January 1st is a very common time for them to raise their prices. And if we can't order by December, we miss that. We get hit with that expense, that added expense. So the last picture, I'll go over this quickly, then Lisa can get into more detail. But this is based on our projected revenue for fiscal 23. So 721,000. The town's share with our plan, with us keeping 52%, right? 52%. The town would get 346,000 basically of that revenue rather than the 721. They wouldn't fund, you would not fund the 85,000 for maintenance. You wouldn't fund the 43,000 for fuel. So those are net savings. So the net impact to the general fund, you would be like you were getting 475,000. Now, if you compare the current fiscal year we're in now, we're getting 700. You would be getting, the town general fund gets 700, but they have to pay 126 for our fuel and maintenance. So you have a net of 573. Next year's reduction, when you compare 23 to 22, this year to next year, it would just be a net reduction of 97,000 for this plan. And in fact, that actually gets changed a little because the lease payment goes down by roughly 12,000. So the reduction in the general fund would be a net of 85. So that net reduction with the seed money allows us to move forward with this plan. Also, the lease payments that we now pay will go away by fiscal 30. Those lease payments are for prior purchases like the boat and the ambulance we currently have. But those lease payments averaging 121,000 right now, they would go away. If we continue down the road we're going, those lease payments will just get worse. That's my part. So you want to dive into some numbers?
Sure.
If the council wants. Okay.
Well, actually, not start with numbers. I'm actually going to talk about that's when Chief brought this to my attention a few months ago. Like right away, this is what an accountant was, because it's forward thinking for one. It's fiscally responsible. He's funding, basically, he's funding his depreciation, which he used those terms, to replace the public safety equipment for this department. So first off, it's not a total cost. It's not a total increase in the total cost to the town. It's just a more disciplined approach to the replacement of this equipment. So, I mean, for me, it's an easy sell, just because it's long term. Oftentimes, governments look short term. He's looking long term. He's looking at the public safety. So, also, when he's walking through this, I think one of the things we looked at is it's a requested profit share percentage of 52%. But when you start bringing down to who pays the maintenance and who pays the fuel, the effective rate is a 66, it turns back the other way. The general fund's actually still getting 66%, not 48% because of the funds that have been taken off the plate with the fuel and maintenance. So it kind of flips it, turns it over, but again, it's not an increase in the total cost of anything. We're gonna have to replace this equipment anyway. It's just more of this approach. Any questions on the monies or the it's pretty simple.
So I have some questions on the numbers tables that were part of the backup. You know, a little more, pardon my ignorance on this, profit share. 52%, I see the other tables in here have 1%, 55%, different scenarios.
Absolutely.
Profit share of what happens to the other piece,
Ambulance revenue,
right? And what happens to the other
it
piece?
stays in the general.
Stays in the general fund, so this would go into the capital, I see.
That's right.
The, am I correct that there are different scenarios, that this
There
is,
are.
they're all the same essentially proposal, but instead of $1.5 million, it's $1,250,000 with a different profit, revenue shares, so all for our consideration. Those two scenarios.
Yes, I mean, this was the first one we developed,
Right,
and then one of our scenarios actually started looking at police vehicles as well, because this is, after all, a public safety plan.
sure.
But when we're adding public safety, like cruisers, we would need to increase the profit, what we call profit share, to be able to have a self-sustaining plan.
So page 1, if you will, is different than the other 3 pages. It has a few more out years, and it has a revenue, that's a profit share of 71%.
I think that's the difference.
That includes the police cruisers.
Okay.
And the reason that shows some extra out years, I looked at it when I first had it done, and if you'll notice, I can't see because of that. 21, 22. Look, if you look at fiscal 2033. No glasses.
All right.
Fiscal even 31, 34, sorry. Before I highlighted it, if you look down the bottom, I was down to 28,000. If you come down, little, right there, fiscal 34, 28,000. So when I saw, that was my initial plan, that's how much I had laid out. And when I saw that, I said, well, someone's gonna look at that and say, look, chief, you're already down to 28, what's the next year look like? So on that final spreadsheet, I said, I'll add 4 more years just to show there's recovery and sustaining of it beyond that point. But initially, I had just gone out that far. That's why the other tabs that you have, the other sheets, just are my initial.
And so what you are asking, Mr. Ray, you're asking us to approve 1.5. Would that be at sort of the layout that we see on page 3?
I think, again, the print's too small for me to see into. But the 1.5 million for the fire apparatus, we can always discuss, once we get this program on the road, we can add other public safety vehicles or apparatus or equipment into it, but we want to get this program off the ground and see it successful, and then we can reevaluate it again. But the 1.5 seemed to, we looked at up and down the scale, putting in more, putting in less, and 1.5 seems to be a sweet spot, and with the least impact on the general fund, as Lisa and Paul have described. You get a payback once we stop funding the maintenance and the fuel, you know, the percentage goes up again. So obviously in the first year, we're going to have to figure out, you know, how to fund that delta, which is, I think, 120,000 to after the numbers.
It's only 90, it's next year, it's 96. Well, actually, with the factoring in the leasing, it's about $85,000.
So we'll have to figure out where that is, but $85,000, I'm sure that we can figure that out. And then once you've done it the first year, you're off the races, because now we factored it in the budget, and we don't have to do that.
The second thing about that, I just want to add on, the ARP money has to be obligated by 24, and it has to be spent by 26.
Correct.
This 1.5, we meet that with the necessary purchases of the fire equipment, so that's another bonus on this.
sound like you would say something else.
I like it. I don't know if you want to, Mr. President, if you want to entertain a motion to approve that, or if you want to go back to
Well, I want to look at a couple of things, just quick numbers for the past 5 years. We're at an average of about 777. Just have to come out that way, rather than 700,000 of EMS revenue.
And we were, I think we were at 730, but
Yes.
again, when we were working on this a few months ago, our revenue did take a big hit in the last year. And I'm not quite sure we're gonna get even back up to that 7 this year. I'm sure it will come back based on our averages. But when COVID hit, you might think that ambulance service was used more, but it wasn't. Because if you remember in the beginning, everyone was told to stay home, deal with it at home unless you had respiratory issues. So our calls actually went down and our revenue went down.
I know this is billed as a fire apparatus funding plan, but I would like to see this more, Mr. Rayner has mentioned it as a public safety plan. And I include Mr. Woodhead in public safety, because if it's January and it's snowing like the bugger outside, your truck's not getting to the fire if his trucks aren't running. So I want to see this as more of an overall public safety plan, that if, and as you mentioned, emergency comes up and, or there's a deal that's too good to be passed up, whether it be police vehicles or a DPW vehicle, we can use it for everything. It's not just a fire department apparatus plan.
And as Mr. Rayner alluded to, we can build that in, and that's why with all the formulas and everything, the spreadsheet that Lisa had plugged in, it's very simple to look to add a cost. Like I added 2 police cruisers and I factored them out with inflation over the life of it. And then you can see where you end up in the hole financially, change the percentage. And I think it came up to 71%. So again, if you said, well, let's put 2 cruisers in there every year, then it's 71%. If you factored in a 3rd police cruiser, we just have to look at that number where it gets plugged in.
Thank you, Chief. And just to, as Mr. Rayner said, this plan, this just didn't come about. This is something that the Chief and Mr. Rayner have been looking at for a few years. And, that initial seed money that they're talking about was really hard to come by. So that's why this thing has kind of been on the back burner. But with the opportunity that we have and the specific, pots of where you can spend your money, this really seems like a very good application of building the way for us. And I think this is a great plan. I'm hoping that we can get this through.
I'll just make a comment so that it sounds like a great plan. Honestly, at face value, it sounds like a no-brainer. We should probably find the money to get it off the ground and do this. I would be in favor of expanding it and making it more of a public safety program where we can address a lot of our equipment across the town. I guess my biggest reservation and my concern is that it's the single largest line item in the use of these funds. And I don't think that reflects the priorities or areas of interest expressed by our residents. I would prefer to see us spend more money on infrastructure and not buying equipment. I know I've said this here before, but on a yearly basis, we spend 23% of our budget on public safety, and that's extremely important. But we spend 6% on DPW, and we have severe infrastructure needs. And to me, this would have been a really good opportunity to make a dent in that realm. But this is a great plan, so we should be doing both. And I probably would have prioritized the use of these funds differently, because in terms of a grant and an opportunity to make an impact in our town and address some of the longstanding needs that we have. But then I would argue that the equipment, the apparatus replacement plan that you guys have proposed is a great idea, and I would support it without a doubt, but I think we should probably find money in our budget to get that program, off the ground as a long-term, capital improvement strategy for our town.
I think infrastructure is a great idea as well. I think the hope would be that the $1.75 trillion that was approved 2 weeks ago, some of that would funnel down to the town levels. But that's remains to be seen with DOT and how the monies are allocated. There
Correct,
is
but this
some,
is money we know we're gonna get.
right, well, this is, yes, well. So until it's in our bank
Until we
account,
actually get it,
it's not
we
money
know.
to be play on yet. But there are 4 plans in front of you. You have a $1.5 million plan, or 2 $1.5 million plans, right? A 1.25 and a $1 million plan. The first $1.5 million plan, which I think is the top one here, which is that 71% number, puts us more into that public safety realm where we're looking at police cruisers, even though I think our police department generally goes through about 3 a year. Sometimes it's more than that, depending on who runs into them, unfortunately. And the police department over the years has done a very good job of rotating cars around so that they last those 6-7 years. I don't see where we can fit a 3rd cruiser in there until perhaps, and I don't know how much, Lisa, you've worked in the lease payments coming off and those monies coming out and whether or not that, I know we budget $36,000 for a new police car and you've got budgeted 2 cruisers for 140. And I know that there's extra stuff, as Chief mentioned, like battery here or a flashlight there or the lights here, lettering on the side and all the other fun stuff.
And that number, the police chiefs told me that with the new SUVs and so forth and all the lighting, and it's in that 70 range. So that's why we started with 140 for 2.
And inflation and everything else that's coming along these days. The fact you can't even buy a car right now anyways.
Well,
Right.
the other beauty of this is in this funding, same decisions that I will have to make. If we can get away without 70, if there's 65, that's good. That leaves extra funding source for when maybe there is a police vehicle that is needed and it's 90. Or same with my apparatus. I may have to look at it 1 year and say, I want to do without getting that new car because we need the engine a year sooner than we thought we were going to. But it's very simple with the spreadsheet in this Excel. You can literally just slide it into the next year and see what happens with the funding.
And Chief, these requests, whether it's each year, those requests will come for council approval. So it's, the council's still gonna know how the money's being spent.
You have a very robust, strict town purchasing policies, so any purchases like this need to come to the council.
Now, I would, from just for my own knowledge, would you want to review the annual request or the individual request?
Yes. Both.
Yeah.
I don't want to see a plan that you bring forth in February and say, these are our planned purchases of fire apparatus, police apparatus, equipment in the budget. And then we turn back around in December and there's 7 ambulances and the ladder truck never existed. So that can't happen.
No, what I meant by that is if I said to you, okay, I'd like to go order this year an ambulance and an engine and a new car. It's in our plan. Get the approval. Or do we want me to come in February for the car and in March for the engine?
I want you to come in with a plan that says, this is our plan, but a plan that's changed.
We're getting into my room here.
Right.
Okay. The budget. Okay. And the budget comes to you for approval every April, and in there, prior to that, we've already had a CIP discussion. You approve the CIP, so the plan you do approve. Anything that's in that CIP, just because you approved it, large purchases still need to come to you before you pull the trigger on it. So he's right. He was still, in February, if we're gonna buy the truck in February, even though you approved it in April, we still gotta come to you and get the permission to buy the truck, even though you approved it. But now you have to approve the purchase.
So me, as I'm looking at these numbers, and it is a little bit of a larger pill to swallow off the top, but I would rather us see a long-term financing plan, which is what this is, of our fleet replacement, essentially is what it comes out to be, but public safety replacement. So I'm actually leaning towards the 71% side with the police cruisers mixed in there, which makes our job and Mr. Raider's job a little bit harder coming forward in the next 3 months and building a budget. But I think there are ways that we can find $126,000, if that's the number that I'm reading correctly, Lisa. I got 71%.
126 of what is it?
126, 860.
That's your fuel and maintenance.
One below.
So what's our delta?
The delta is the difference between 573 and 330. Between your one and your two.
So that's what we have to make up.
573.
So that's
175.
245. That's a bigger number. Yeah, but that's okay.
Yeah, so that's the 140 plus the 85.
To a significant extent, to a significant extent, the equipment will be replaced, whether we have a fund and plan and the idea that there's this seed of money as we put it. We could never do this without some large infusion to keep it off. My only hesitance is, gee, I wish we had double that fund.
Me too.
Right, because there are other priorities in that. But the people of the town of Portsmouth have to pay for these things as we need them, because we require public safety systems in place. So I'm on board with the idea of doing this.
For the record, the number is about 235.
235, yeah. And then we can talk about the other
Priorities. I mean, if you look at that, maybe on the priorities, there's
So I have questions
200,
about those.
160 sitting there too.
That's true.
So you could add
You could put that in.
more seed money there, but that might make it a little different, but
Right.
we don't want to get into pulling into operational things
No.
and creating holes for ourselves.
So I have other questions on the priorities, listed items.
So, well, for starters, but now we've got 2 items here going at the same time. So do we want to go back? Or do we want to vote on, I think we go back first. Let's go back
If
first.
Mr. Cass has next question.
Let's go back. But thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah.
So you want to go back to the overall list? Which is different.
Just the top, no, it's just the top part is.
Just, yeah, the bottom line is different. The priorities are all still there.
The top numbers have already been approved by this council.
Yep, that's right.
So we're just looking from emergency apparatus CIP down.
Exactly.
So if we could get,
Just so those like.
if we could get, really what we need tonight is the approval of the plan. So, because as you said, the prices are going up January 1st. So there are some purchases there that we need to, at least one that we need to commit to. And we will bring that forward. If you approve the 1.5, if you approve this CIP, this public safety apparatus plan, we can come to you again at the next meeting with a request to purchase the engine. The others, the rest below that, we're asking you to approve those as priorities, and then we will come to you in future meetings with more specific information on exactly how much would be needed. And we put a lot of work into this, but those, you'll notice, I mean, most of these are round numbers. And we don't know exactly how much, for instance, exactly how much, they didn't pass the federal budget yet, so we don't know if the earmark will pass.
Right. So that was my question.
So we need to know, that's kind of, that domino needs to fall before we can figure out how we get Rhodes Island with the rest of it. And then, so the bottom line is, I'm asking that you would approve the CIP plans presented, and then everything below that emergency after CIP line, approve those in principle, or in priorities, and we can get to work on those.
So if we approve the 1.5, 71% plan, that gives us a delta. I'll start with you, gives you a delta of 235.
Right.
To make up during the budgeting process that you have started, but we haven't seen as of yet.
And call it public safety.
And call it a public safety capital improvement program.
Yeah.
Funding. Public safety capital funding program. Somebody can make an acronym. My two main concerns are the main funding source that you would have to adjust would be, which would be my hope, is that we have less ambulance calls, because that means people aren't sick. And then we have to make adjustments to it. But over the past 5 years that I look back, we're looking at 2016 was 787, it was 806, 17, 751, and 18, 804, 19, and 2020 went down to 736. So we're still around at 777. Even in a pandemic year, we're still relatively stable. Yeah. So I will make the motion to approve the public safety capital funding plan at the 71% with $1.5 million of the opera money.
All those in favor?
Ms. Abbott? Nay. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 4-1. And do you need any work on the priorities, or you're okay? The list is the list for now. And we can, that can potentially be moved around as you come back and say, Brian got a really good deal on storm drains, and we can do it for $75,000.
Correct. And obviously, I know it seems like a lot of climbing, but we have to obligate this money by the end of 2024. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. So if I know that these are the priorities, we're going to start devoting resources to developing these as projects.
But for me, the biggest one that sticks out is the next biggest dollar amount is the $750 for the cesspool replacement program, which we need to really figure out how to set that up to help the residents that can't do it. And whether it's just going to be a grant, or if it's a assessment against the house for when they sell in the future, and that money comes back to the town.
We've looked into that, and I don't want to get people's hopes up.
Right.
That would not meet the legal requirements of ARP. So we wouldn't be able to do that, but we would come to you, like, again, if you approve these as priorities, we'll begin work on that immediately. We'll come to you very soon with a way, a proposal and recommendation on how we would implement that program. And the other thing there, not only do we need to obligate these funds by the end of 2024, but by the end of 2024, there's 500 systems that also need to be replaced. The timing was at the same boat.
I hate to use the worn out shovel ready phrase, but we all know with the inflation the way it's going now, the quicker we move on these things, the potential for cost savings because of inflation is there for us as well. So we're able to move on certain things that maybe free up money for other areas. How much of the money do we actually have in here?
Yeah.
We do have it actually physically in our bank account.
It's FY21.
Yeah, those funds have been dispersed. They're just sitting in restricted now.
Do we know when the FY22 funds will?
October 1st. So it could be any, theoretically,
Could be
fiscal year. We're in
22.
22 as far as the government's concerned.
pass that time to the next.
So do we need a further motion? I don't think so. No.
Well, we would like you to approve these, as the priority list, and start working on these.
We just need a motion. A motion to approve the priorities as presented by the town administrator for the spending of the rest of the department.
Second.
I would like to just note that you're going off the things and agree that we do not have funds to pay for last mile house hookup fiber. And I would like to take some time and diligence to put this together, and if there are any sort of pilot project. Because that was such a frequently voiced.
We know that the PEDC is going to come forward with a report,
Right.
so we just left it blank.
So it's not off the list, is my point.
As the liaison, they are working. I did go, and they do have a good plan. They know there's some challenges there.
Thank you. So it's a motion and a second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Abbott?
Nay.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
And Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 4-1. We're moving on. Don't we carry? To item number 4, is a request permission to submit applications for the 2022 RIDEM Recreation Development Grant Program. Mr. Crosby.
Thank you, Mr. President. The 2022 DEM Recreation Development Grant Program has recently opened up, and we have identified 2 projects we think that will score highly and have a good chance of getting funded. Both are recreation facilities improvement grants. The first one is at Glen Park. It is installing a new 24 by 24 foot pavilion with a concrete pad adjacent to the existing one, and accompanying it is a new storage shed. The total project cost $97,000, grant amount $78,000. The match, our 20% match would be $19,490. The second project is at Elmhurst Park. The first piece of it is to finish off the previous phase of the parking lot by installing 4 standard light poles to complete that project, and then to convert the existing underutilized basketball courts to 4 state-of-the-art, if you will, pickleball courts with new blacktop, vinyl fencing, pedestrian gate, surface seal coat, striping, netting, and so forth. And this will be accessed, number 1, by the 12-foot wide a path from the parking lot down to the pickleball courts, and secondly, a ADA compliant path from over near the Glen Manor House. The turnaround, if you're familiar with the area, the turnaround there, the access to the pickleball courts will be ADA compliant from there. Total project is $265,000. Grant amount we're applying for is $212,000. Our match commit to $53,140. So the total of the 2 projects, our match amount, I'm here to ask you to allow me to apply for these DEM recreation development grants programs for these two projects and commit to $72,603 of $30 of town resources in the name of cash.
Where we've done this in the past is, we put a placeholder in the budget. I anticipate that these grant awards will be announced before the final budget, and if not, we'll budget it for it. But if we don't get them, then obviously that's what that's. We're also, as we've discussed before, we're creating a new line in the budget for grant matches. We find that we get stuck all the time for grant opportunities, just as we discussed with regard to capital. For the fire department, there are often opportunities that we can't take advantage of because there isn't a match in the budget. So we lose out. We can't apply because we know we can't do the match. Very often, we've been able to get around that by saying, okay, well, we'll commit town resources, which ends up being DPW time. But we're maxed out. We have so many grants that we're working on right now, and we've committed that type of match across so many grants. We can't do it anymore. You have to track your man hours, and the number of man hours could easily become more for the grants than we are working on jobs. So we have to follow back. So it would need to be a cash match, and we would.
This might be an odd question. These are the two projects you're forwarding. This is right there. It's the top of it. Looking at the data from, I'd be interested to know what other projects were considered that didn't make it to this list.
The triple S fields, we considered that, but unfortunately, the price to do that project exceeds the limit for this year's round of DM grants. The limit for this year's DM grants is $500,000, and would cost Brian at the effect here, but Gary may have it, but it was well north of $1 million.
Is it 500,000 per project or 500,000 per town?
Gary, if you could answer that question, I think it's 500,000 per project.
The maximum grant amount for these recreation development grants, there's a separate criteria for land acquisition for recreation facilities, but for the development of of recreational facilities, the maximum amount is 400,000. So Brian has identified costs for the 3S property, which far exceed that. And so we've made the decision that these two projects, the Glen Park recreation facilities and the Elmhurst Park recreation facilities, would better suit the criteria of the grant for this 2022 grant round. And I would ask that when you're deciding about this, that I need to know your order of priority for these two grant applications. It has to do with the scoring of the grants. With top priority obviously gets better scoring, but we only have two. So please, in your deliberation about whether you want to allow us to go ahead and commit funds and apply for these grants, we need to know the priority as well.
I mean, just add, the Elmhurst project is self-explanatory, renovate that underutilized recreation facility for pickleball. The reason for the Glen Park Recreation Facility grant request, that's where we run our summer programs, and the popularity of that program has grown to such that we're exceeding the capacity of the pavilion is there, so we would like to build a new pavilion. Allow us to assign more kids in summer.
So this is an addition to the existing pavilion, keeping the existing pavilion.
Yeah, we would keep the existing pavilion, the new pavilion would be built right next to it. But we'd also have to add the electrical connections and so on, so forth like that.
I'll take a shot. I think number 2 should be first and number 1 should be second.
I agree.
I have 2 questions. What did we apply for last year,
We weren't open this year.
the year before? We've applied for these grants before.
Yes, three items.
All right, so the last time we applied for them, what did we apply for? I think that the lighting and the first part was,
We did a paving for that. Go back, it was some money for Mount Hope Park. Honestly, it was, we didn't get anything that round.
No, we did. We applied for the 3S Fields, the bathhouse at Sandy Point, the Elmhurst Park lighting to complete that, the Glen Park Exhibit Hall, and Mount Hope Park seawall. We did get the grant for the Mount Hope Park seawall. We have yet to pull the trigger on constructing that piece, and we have some time, but that was the only of the applications that we applied for that we received.
okay, and then my second question, which frankly is kind of a rhetorical question, but is how do these 2 proposals stack up with regards to our long-term planning for our town parks and recreation properties? Because I agree with you, Rich, that we get hurt by not having a dedicated fund for grant matches. But the other thing that really hurts us is not having a consistent plan to which we're working towards and can point to and say, this is a set of priorities. So, you know, I see number 1, although I think it's very important and certainly meet a need that we have in town, it's kind of out of the blue and hasn't really come up before. I think Elmhurst, okay, I can see why we throw pickleball in there, maybe because of what's been funded in the past. And we've applied for the lights before, but I think this you know, we're not very consistent in our long-term planning, and we don't show progress toward a goal in terms of what our community has prioritized. I know we're working on a Parks and Rec and Open Space Master Plan, and that alone will really set the tone for putting us in a better position to get funding. If you look across the state, the projects that get the most funding are projects that are prioritized in town's master plans. And I think that is the critical piece that we're missing, and that's what really adds context for this prioritizing. So we're not like prioritizing on a whim, so to say. So, you know, they're both great projects. I will add one other comment that I think saying underutilized is not fair. It's abandoned. That's why I'm trying to use, because if it wasn't abandoned, it would probably be used. Yeah, so I guess I
think your point is very well taken. Absolutely on target. Unfortunately, the master plan won't be available until March. You never know when these DEM grant rounds are going to be announced. So this was just announced, and there's a very short trigger time. This has to be submitted by mid-December. So Elmhurst Park obviously has been on our radar for quite a while. The Glen Park, again, that's in response to what residents want. The recreation program is growing by leaps and bounds. The ability to cater to the demand for kids signing up for summer camp is great. It's exceeding that demand is exceeding our ability to cater to them. We need someplace. Every summer we struggle where we're going to put these kids. So again, we've looked at the raw data that we've been evaluating so far for the master plan. I think this fits. But you're absolutely right. Once we get the master plan, we'll be better positioned to present more thought out, better plan, more articulate grant application. renovations, but I don't think that should hinder or stop us from applying for this round. It's just be an opportunity for us.
Yes, completely agree. I think that we have nothing to lose by applying for this round and, you know, I could probably make an argument either way. I think Elmhurst Park has a ton of potential and could really benefit from this investment. I think it shows at least some consistency with their previous requests, so that would be the strongest argument, I think, in favor of that one. However, Glen Park, I think, probably would meet more of our town's immediate needs and would align better with some of the residents' priorities that we saw in the responses to the surveys, because we have done the surveys. But to my point there is a pavilion really what we need? Because I would argue we probably need a community center that could house kids in the summer, regardless of whether it's pouring rain or not.
I agree 1,000%. The community center is not going to be purchased for $500,000.
No, but are we wasting $100,000 towards something that would meet the needs better? I don't know, this is a much bigger question, so I understand the need, the desire to take advantage of this opportunity, but I also, I don't like the idea of making investments and making commitments for our town that aren't the right solution for what we need. So I have a hard time really picking one that stands out as, oh, this is it, this is definitely what we should do. But I understand the desire to want to take advantage of this opportunity, so.
Gary here, I am at your service.
So there's either one big motion or two motions that need to be made, either. So I would make a motion that we approve Mr. Crosby going forward with these two grants, and that we make number two, number one, and number two. The pickleball course is first priority and the Glen Pavilion is second priority. I hope in future years we will have that community center. Now that it's looking for.
Second. I just want to put this on the record. Elmhurst Park does have a master plan. Redeveloping that area is consistent with the Elmhurst Park master plan.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Ms. Abbott?
Nay.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 4-1.
Good luck, Mr. Crosby.
Thank you very much.
Need to keep a pickleball instead.
I would say that installing these 4 pickleball courts, as far as I understand, would double the amount of pickleball courts on Aquidneck Island instantly. So perhaps we will be the pickleball champions before long.
I know that. There's one you don't know of.
Yeah. The demographic that plays pickleball might need a restroom facility too. Let's keep that in mind.
Okay, let's move on to number 5. Request approval of the 2022 transfer station sticker fee.
Council President, members of the council, I'd like to go over the transfer station stick cost with everyone. Just a few things, I'll highlight a few things on our spreadsheet. When I say the CPIU, that just stands for Consumer Price Index Urban. So there's a few things that reflect the CPIU. All right, so the first biggest thing right now, as you go down the spreadsheet, is the pay bags under general revenue. The cost of these pay bags have increased by 7.5% this year because the CPIU is 5.5 in the contract with Waste Zero. They can go CPIU 5.5% plus 2% on top of that. So they're going to increase it 7.5%. So we increased the bags themselves by 7.5%. So right now we pay $10 for a sleeve of bags, no matter what size, large, medium, or small. And we're asking to increase it by $10.75. We're asking for a 75-cent increase for pay bags. So as you keep going down, the next biggest thing that jumps out is the operation costs. Right now, the operation costs to run the transfer station, we talked to Waste Connect. The operation of the transfer station at second floor is only going to 0.4% because they increased it last July, I think they increased it amount, so they said they were only going to increase 0.4%. But all the transportation costs for the solid waste, recyclable, C&D, yard waste, they're going to increase that 5.4% just for the trucking costs. The next increase is going to be the raw resource and recovery, the tipping expenses. Right now, we pay $47 per ton. That is good until June 30th. And then after June 30th, it's going to jump up to $54 a ton. The next biggest thing that jumps out is on the weight on, let's see. Next biggest item that jumps out is going to be the preventive maintenance. That jumped up $10,580 because we had a breakdown at the transfer station. One of the motors of the compact, well, not the compact, but one of the motors of the compact died and we had to replace that. So that's the biggest increase on that. So after you add up all the calculations, the new sticker fee cost is going to be $210 for a transfer station sticker for 2022. And that's what the increased bag cost of 75 cents. So I would just like to request that the town council adopt a new sticker fee for $210 for 2022 stickers.
You need both, correct?
What's that?
You need to adopt the sticker fee of 210 and the bags of 1075.
Right.
So.
Second.
David?
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0.
So next thing on the agenda is just a couple of changes for transfer station application fees. We'll start with the Portsmouth one first. Yeah, Portsmouth transfer station. There's only a few that we highlighted in red. The first one, the annual sticker cost, we dropped it down to 211 to 210. And then right to the next sentence down, residents are allowed 2 annual stickers per household. We just deleted the value through January 31st. Then on the last page where the C&D is, we just deleted load. It says each additional load, instead of load, we just say container. So it's a 32-gallon container on both of those. And then the last one right there, C&D loads absolutely cannot contain. We just added in the last one is fiberglass shower tubs, boats, and hard plastics. Because we have a hard plastic pickup day, but fiberglass tubs, showers, and boats are not allowed at the transfer station. We just wanted to spell it out for anyone who's wanting to get rid of it. Transfer station, we'll be able to accept that. That was the Portsmouth one. We can try to approve the Portsmouth.
With regards to the Portsmouth one, you might have a question regarding why we struck the language saying the sticker valid through January 31st. That represents a grace period, and what ends up happening every year, people argue with us and say that their sticker is valid through January 31st, and then they don't understand why they can't get a rebate if they left a little bit earlier, and then they calculate that their sticker is good for 13 months. We're just getting rid of that language. We start selling the stickers January 1st. You have a grace period. Last year, the grace period went all the way, I think, till April 1st. The grace period will still be there. We're just eliminating this language so that we don't get caught in that logic argument.
Why don't we just spell it out that it's valid through December 31st?
Yeah, but we could have, we say annual sticker.
I think it makes sense to say December 31st is annual.
I bought mine in July, so it's good through July.
Exactly.
Understood.
So it should be it valid until December 31st, 2022. Change that. So you will get that argument that I bought in July, so it won't be good through July. So it should, yeah, it's just valid through December 31st.
you guys like to make a motion to pass this one before I move to the
I'd like to make a motion with the changes and the addition of ballot through December 31st.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes. 5-0.
So now we go on to the Brewers Island Transfer Station sticker application. The changes on this one are a little bit different. We sell 1 week passes, and we want to keep the 1 week passes the same as Portsmouth 1 week passes. Portsmouth charges $50, and we just want to keep Brewers Island the same as Portsmouth at $50. And then I guess we're going to change valid through. I don't know why we have March 30th on that one.
Because their grace period ran through their grace period runs through the end of March. We've always done it that way.
It's when people move back, so that's
They
March
go
30th is when they're.
Exactly.
Maybe it's March 30th when they're, it ends, and people start buying it.
So that this is what we changed a little bit to this 6 month January. We sell 6 month passes, 4 month passes, 1 week passes. And right now, the 1 week passes for Prudence Island are mostly for people that rent down at Prudence Island. So we put it in, we're having a little problem with people buying 1 week passes and emptying out their houses. So they were paying $30 and they were loading up our dumpsters instead of, and we're paying, $1,100 to move the dumpster off the island and they just clean up their house. So we're requesting that, just say 1 week passes are only for resident household waste and mixed recyclables. That way, I understand that, they buy 6 month or 4 month pass, and it's only $15 more for a 4 month pass, so they have to pay for a 6 month pass, but we're just trying to curb a little bit of the use of that.
Just for clarification here, on a 6 month pass, that's $105,
105.
not $1,050.
It's hard to see, but we cross off the state.
Yeah.
And then when we go over to the next page, diversion items, we left, it used to say, if possible, remove, with valves removed. They have to have the valves removed, because if they don't have the valves removed, they bring them over there, and we have to remove the valves. And on the Portsmouth side, it says valves have to be removed, so we just want to make sure that the valves are removed. And it's the same language on the last page, except for we don't allow weekly sticker holders to get C&D passes, but we will allow 6 month or 4 month passes, because the 6 month or 4 month passes are usually for year-round residents, because they only buy the 6 months or half the year. So we just deleted the weekly passes, so people who have weekly passes can't have a C&D stickers. But everyone else can, and it's a fees for $32 for $50 for a 32 gallon container. We just have to cross off per load. We just want to be clear that I think a truck load is a load for $50. And same again at the very bottom, we don't allow fiberglass showers, tubs, bowls, or hot flasks.
Motion to approve the new rules for the Prudence Island Transfer Station. That's presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson? Aye. Mr. Kelly? Aye. Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Red. Okay, moving on to our public hearing. Changes to the town code, chapter 124, entitled Burning Outdoor. Chief.
Good evening, everyone. So I came before you a couple of meetings ago to discuss this amending our burning ordinance. Even though we have recently done it, we ran into, we noticed a few changes that were necessary, a little issue in town. So we wanted to make some changes. These have been processed through the town solicitor. He's reviewed them. You look at the copy in front of you. One is just a cleanup change there on 124-3, just what it refers to references. But one of the big ones is 124-4. We're talking about bonfires. We've had some bonfires that were a little larger than they should have been. So we're going to restrict them in size, but keeping things in mind that maybe the town wants to have a the bonfire like that. So we're going to limit them in size based upon the location, anticipated attendance, available access for fire department. Myself or one of my designees will determine what size. If somebody wants to have a bonfire, we have to go inspect them anyway, so they can, when they get their bonfire permit, we'll have to discuss where they're having it, what size we feel will be appropriate. In the next section, under open fire, 124-6, we added some language that more reflects to 124-7, which is contained burning, which we talked about when we did the major changes earlier in the year. Contained burning is basically like in a chimney or a store-bought type of containment. The other is open fire, so you've raked up branches, put together branches from the yard, cleaning up, now you have an open fire. Well, we put some language in there about where they could be, and then also caveat, we wanted to keep them 50 feet from structure and so forth. But we understand there are some properties that might not be able to attain that. So what we did was the same as with the contained burn, has to be 25 feet. The container open burn is 50. If people don't have that setback, they have a small lot, they can call us. We'll go down and look at it, determine if there is a safe area, the safest spot for them to burn, and allow them to burn in that location. That's the gist of it. That's all of the changes.
There's a public hearing. Comments?
No one with their hand up.
So this would basically not allow brush fires in Island Park without you or your designees.
Do you mean an open burn? Because we don't want brush fires anywhere.
Well, okay.
We put those out.
We put those out, open burn.
Okay, open.
Leaves and sticks.
That means if you, yeah, if you're breaking up the yard, you have leaves and sticks and so forth, and you want to burn, and you don't have the 50-foot setback.
Nobody does.
You would have to contact us and we'll go, and we'll go, I believe I mentioned in here, it's good for the year. So call us once, we'll go, this is the best spot. Okay, you're good.
Further questions, comments? Motion to close the public hearing. Second.
Then you, but so I'll second that.
All in favor?
Is that it?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Close public hearing. On to the proposed changes.
Motion to approve these changes as presented.
All those in favor?
Is that it?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
And Mr. Aguirre?
Motion passes 4-1.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We have correspondence.
Motion to receive and place on file.
All those in favor?
Is that it?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Next, we have future meetings, December 13th. We do not have a December 27th meeting, then it's January 10th and January 24th.
I have a question. You mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that the solar ordinance moratorium will back in on December 13th. agenda.
That's what we said. We put it on the next agenda. December 13th. Okay. That's all we got tonight.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson? Aye. Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Pass 5-0. Hopefully we'll have a nice Thanksgiving. We will see you.